And we are live. Hello, everyone. Number one Marmaduke fan here, and we're doing more indie comic spotlights. Today, I am joined by Eric Berry, the co-writer for Sporkman Goes to Japan and a brand new Sporkman spinoff. Say hi, Eric.
Hello, everyone.
All right. I think we'll start by watching the little preview video for the Indiegogo campaign. And then we'll ask Eric a little bit about the history of Sporkman. We'll get all the juicy lore we can get.
First introduced in the 3-issue miniseries, Sporkman Goes to Japan. ADF agent Natsumi stars in her own spin-off manga series, Spearhead. Spearhead Zero follows the events of Sporkman Goes to Japan and sets the stage for Natsumi's solo adventure as she faces threats to Japan, both old and new foes, as well as learning more about her past and destiny. Spearhead Zero is an action-packed 20 pages of manga goodness. Let the chase begin.
All righty. Zoom out. Did the audio come through okay for you, Eric?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I was thinking halfway through. Oh no, I didn't do a sound test. Oh no. All right. So, all right. So, Sporkman, I think we've talked about Sporkman conventions and Sporkman Goes to Japan in the past, but I'd love for, maybe like for new people, what is Sporkman? How did Sporkman come to be?
Okay, so we're kind of like veterans of this in some weird way, because we actually came up with Sporkman as a superhero. It was really just a joke. We were, it was like 2 a.m. or something like that, and my co-writer Chuck and I at the time, we shared an apartment, and we were the place all our friends hung out at, because except for the two of us, like, everyone was still living at home or had just gone to college or whatever. And we were just coming out with ideas of, like, I had come up with like Snap Tight, the snap together man, and if he gets hit, he falls apart, things like that.
Yeah.
And we just loved Sporkman. We just thought that was the funniest. And as a joke, a couple years later, I was married, and my wife and I were having a Halloween party, and I said, I'm going to do a Sporkman costume. I think everyone's going to love it. So I made this Sporkman costume, and everyone thought it was funny. And it was about the time where my wife and I discovered conventions were a thing, and I think it might have even been the second convention we ever went to, I think. And I entered the costume contest to Sporkman, and the audience freaking loved it. Like, they were just busting up laughing, and at one point they're like, "Spork, Spork, Spork," just chanting. I actually have video of when I walk out on stage on our YouTube channel, Sporkman Studios. And afterwards, like, everyone wanted to get their picture taken with Sporkman, and people would joke around. They'd be like, "Hey, when's the comic coming out?" And I knew they were just saying it as a joke, but I could see that they really responded to the character. And so I talked with Chuck and our other co-creator Chris, who he's actually the one that termed Sporkman, and he's got like sporks on his body and stuff. And I said, "Hey, we've always talked about doing like comics or something like that. Hey, wouldn't it be cool to make a Sporkman comic?" And at the time, we had only intended for it to be just one. It was a one shot, and just to say we did it. And we said, if we do an origin and all this stuff, it's going to be too long. And they say, write what you know. So we had a little bit of the art imitating life situation where I said, why don't we just have it where Sporkman is at a sci-fi convention? And so we said, okay, well, what things do you find at a sci-fi convention, and how can we have Sporkman interact with those situations? And so it was written in a way for some of the people that were there. Like, it premiered at the same convention that I did the costume at. And so it was like, now he has his own comic. And I even did things like print up flyers like, who is this Sporkman? And I like put it up in the stalls in the bathroom. So if someone goes in a stall, sitting there doing their business, and they're looking at this flyer, like, who's Sporkman? Oh, I need to check out this table where I can find out who Sporkman is. And, we'd have the comics being sold there. So it was, that's kind of how we marketed it and everything, as just this little one shot. And a couple years later, we came up with the idea of, we were kind of poking fun at all these different anime tropes that are silly, but you love them kind of thing. And we're like, what if Sporkman went to Japan and like all these anime tropes, like that's just how it is over there? It's like giant monster comes through the city. It's like, it's Tuesday, So we ended up doing Goes to Japan, and in that, as well as conventions, there were a lot of things written into the story that they were there really purely to tell that particular story. It wasn't like we said, oh, well, we need to come up with these characters that we're going to come back and revisit and everything. Everything was invented to support just that miniseries. But Chuck and I really liked a lot of the characters that were introduced in it, and the one female character in it, Natsumi. A lot of people were like, oh yeah, I really like this character. And Chuck and I were thinking, we did so much universe building for that Goes to Japan story and have a lot of characters we really like. We really have enough meat there to build upon that and do more with her as a character as well. And so that's how we ended up with Spearhead. And I actually see Neo Stars in the chat, and he is actually the one who came up with the title. He was like, I think that'd be really cool to do a story with her. You could call it something like Spearhead. And I'm like, we're stealing that. It's awesome. I like the name. So thank you for that.
A contribution to comics history from Neostar Productions.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we went with, and we said we're gonna tell her story because there's a lot we can do with her and what she's doing and the organization that she works with, and she's a great character. We knew at one point we at least wanted to do one more Sporkman story where he returns to Japan. But the nice thing is this will let us build the whole universe a lot more.
So I want to, I'm fresh off of reading Sporkman Goes to Japan. So I kind of want to ask a question about that I think might segue into Spearhead. So what I dig about Sporkman is I think you guys are getting the superhero parody downright, where I always compare it to Adam West, how Adam West played Batman. Adam West played Batman with some gravitas and with some heroism, even though the universe he lived in was extremely goofy. So Sporkman does, make mistakes, and he keeps getting people's names wrong, but he has this like very confident masculine quality to him that contrasts beautifully with his costume and the absurdity of the world he lives in. So do you think will that sense of humor carry over into Natsumi's story in Spearhead?
Well, there is definitely going to be a little bit of a tonal shift where Sporkman is a lot more slapstick. Like if you'll see in Goes to Japan, the situation he's in Japan are kind of absurd, as far as, with like kaiju and things like that. And we definitely kind of make it out to be that in this universe, Japan is a little bit different as far as dealing with these threats, where normally Sporkman, in his day-to-day life, he's the absurdity and the rest of the world is a little bit more straight-laced. And so people kind of view him as the oddball. Well, he goes over to Japan, and Japan is an odd place to him, but they still view him as the oddball.
Right.
If you understand what I mean. Like, no matter where he goes, people are going to be like, boy, this guy's kind of weird. But in the end of the day, we always want him to be effective. One thing I've never liked about comedic characters is when they're incapable. Like, I really liked Inspector Gadget when I was little, but I hated his niece and her stupid computer book because they were always the heroes, and he would just, slip on a banana and take out a bad guy accidentally. And we never wanted to play Sporkman as that kind of character. So, in spite of the fact that he's absurd, he is smart, he is effective in the end. He does save the day in the end. But to go back to what you said about some of the tone and everything, the tone is going to shift a bit more because it's not Sumi's not an absurd character. She was just interacting with one, and as far as Sporkman goes. So everything's a little bit more serious. We don't want to make it dark. That's not our intention, to make it really dark. And, we'll probably have humor in it. For example, Team Spork, at some point, it's like they're part of her universe. So at some point, if they show up, they're still absurd. You still have this anthropomorphic cat guy, he's still part of her universe. That doesn't suddenly disappear just because the tone might shift a little bit.
Right. It's a big enough universe for more than one kind of character, but there are consistent aspects of the universe. I guess this is canon to Sporkman, right? The events of Spearhead could be segueing into future Sporkman stories, possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, this is like an interesting kind of bridge episode. And we actually have it subtitled 0 because we're going to do other Sporkman issues that have like she's at least going to get her own miniseries where it has an overarching storyline. You could start at issue 1 without reading issue 0. And you're not, because most issue 0s are almost like a bonus content, and most of the time they're not even released first. Sometimes the first couple are released. But for those that read Japan, they could skip over it, or they could use it. And I think it would be very useful for people that read Goes to Japan and then to transition them to Spearhead, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I noticed that we seem to pick up right where Japan Goes to Japan leaves off, with Shogun Z being put on trial for the crimes he committed in Goes to Japan. So that's a nice, I guess, continuity bridge from the last one to this one. All right.
Yeah,
So
it is written in such a way that, one thing we made sure to even mention in the campaign and in some of the advertising we've done is no one should feel like burdened by the fact that they haven't read Goes to Japan. I think that's very important, because a lot of the way we've written all our Sporkman stories and the ones we want to do in the future is, there may be a timeline, but it isn't necessarily told in chronological order, or even when it is, you can pick up a Sporkman adventure. It's why we subtitle. We don't have Sporkman 1, 2, 3. We have Sporkman Conventions, subtitle, Sporkman Goes to Japan. The next one we're doing, Sporkman on the High Seas. So you can pick up any of those stories, and you get a beginning, a middle, an end. And even if it has a reoccurring character, you might get a notation like, oh, they first appeared in this. But you're never going to feel lost. And that's unfortunately what I think a lot of mainstream ongoing comics do, is they burden themselves with too much previous canon.
Part 16 of a 20-part arc, yeah.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, you might not care about 5 other characters, but you got to read all their stories to understand what's going on with the character you like. Yeah. So, for someone that was only interested in Spearhead, it's not like 100% essential, but it is nice to have. And if they're transitioning from Goes to Japan, it's really, really nice to have.
So
Because
are there plans in the works already for volumes 1 through 3 following issue 0?
yeah, we're actually not sure how many issues it's going to be yet. Um, it's going to have probably some things that might take place and get wrapped up in individual issues, maybe. But then it's definitely going to have a baddie that is the overarching villain through the whole thing. And so, yeah, it might be 3 issues, it might be 6 issues. The way probably we're going to handle it is it'll take as long as it takes.
Right. I like how you've structured the tiers for this one. So what I see is most creators tend to have like a stacking tier, and it gets more expensive, but you get more and more stuff with every tier. So you basically what I like about this one is you've separated it out. So if somebody didn't back Sporkman, you've got a digital tier catch up for them for $18, or they can do like the print copies of conventions and Sporkman Goes to Japan and get the print book of Spearhead if they're a collector like me. So there is an opportunity for people who are interested in Sporkman to get the full Sporkman experience. But you also have everything separated out, like the acrylic standees separate, the international tiers separate. So what I'm guessing is if somebody wants more than one tier, do they have to like edit their contribution and then increase it by the amount of the extra thing they want, so they could get like
Well,
the print
we
copy and
actually have a bunch of add-ons. So, say for example, someone wants all the Sporkman comics to go with it, but they also want the standee, and
yeah,
there's no tier that includes both of those.
right,
They can get the standee tier and then buy the Sporkman comics as an add-on.
gotcha.
So that way, no matter what someone wants, they can. There's probably a method that they can get exactly the stuff they want.
Yeah, just add on the things you want. I kind of like that structure because it just lets me get specifically the items I want. If I didn't want to pay extra to get, this specific item, I don't have to get it just to feel like I need to get the highest tier or something. I like the flexibility of
I,
that.
I tell you, we definitely learned a lot from our previous campaigns, some of what to do and not to do, and we wanted to streamline things and keep them a bit simple because on the previous campaign, we were colorized in Japan, and we had 3 floppies, or you could get the exclusive trade. And then we also had conventions. I think that might have been like an add-on. And then we had posters and we had stickers. And it just got very, very complicated. And we wanted to get very, very tight on budgeting this, where I wasn't as big a help as I could have been to Chuck, because when we were running the previous campaign, I was doing an Indiegogo campaign completely unrelated to comics for my business. And so I was spending so much of my time on that, which left Chuck doing a lot on his own. And we didn't really get to look over everything as much as we could. We had never run a campaign before. And so on this, we were really, really tight. We were like, okay, when we sell these, we want to bag and board them. We have to take into account that extra 30 cents,
Yeah.
per issue or whatever. So we definitely learned a lot. And setting this up was a lot of work, where we are looking at, every last penny to try to uh, make everything as good as possible. And the other thing we definitely want to point out to everyone is that the shipping's included.
Yeah.
Rather than someone have to say, I need to pay this, and then how much is the shipping? They know that price is what they pay.
I noticed that. Yeah, that is a nice option. Basically, takes one less headache. It's probably a headache for you guys, but one less headache for the purchaser. But
It's not really much a headache for us, because, we made sure to budget all that. And we say, okay, this is how much shipping's going to cost. We broke down every little thing, and even down to the issue. So we say, okay, if we need to print, so many issues, well, it's not just shipping to the customer first, it's shipping from the printer to us. And then it's also getting bagged and boarded, and then it's going to be, this much for, shipping. And so we were breaking our costs down to, okay, we need to know, not just as a group, but everything, how much that's costing us. The acrylic standees, obviously they ship to us first, so the standee isn't what they just quote you per standee, but whatever the shipping is, then you got to divide that by how many you're ordering. So we spent so much time, checking and double checking all our figures for this.
Talk a bit about Wicked Publishing. Did they do both the floppies and the trade paperback edition for you?
Yeah, they were all printed through Wicked. We're going with a printer for this campaign. We're going through a printer that we've never worked with before, and I know Chuck was a little hesitant. He's like, "Well, I don't really know," and I'm like, "Look, their pricing is good and everything." And I actually called someone, spoke to them on the phone. They were very receptive, very helpful. And then we actually found out someone else we know actually did print through them, and we know the quality is good. This is not being handled by Wicked at all. They are no longer our publisher. We're not signed with any publisher at the moment. So we're doing all this ourselves, which is, well, how we did it for, over a decade or more.
All right. Interesting. So I noticed that Spearhead is, there were jokes about the manga style in Goes to Japan, but it was kind of like a Western style for some characters and a manga style for other characters in like a mashup universe. I've noticed that there's a distinctly more manga vibe to the panel composition and the action line sensibility. So tell me a little bit about your artist.
Yeah, so I actually can't give you the exact name of our artists. We're working with Ore Studios, and it's actually a number of different artists. So I can't tell you all the ones that worked on it because they're kind of working under an overall studio name.
Gotcha.
But our artists that worked on the previous 4, Gifney Ricarda, it's his studio. Like, he's one of the founding members of it. And in between, I think when we were doing the 3rd Japan issue, I think it was, which of course was a number of years ago that we did the main comic in black and white. I think he was just in the process of joining forces with a bunch of other artists there in Indonesia, and they formed Ore Studios. And over the year, they've kind of grown their studio, and they do more than just comic art. They do like GIFs, and they do some video stuff. They even worked, I think, on some artwork for Tron Legacy, like in the Asian market. So they do conceptual art, all kinds of things. And Gifney, he doesn't really do a lot of the interior art like this anymore, because he's like one of the head guys there. He's got a lot of people under him, I guess. And so like I said, I think there might be 2 different artists that have worked on it. But
that's
kind
really
of
interesting though, because I mean, I know that the studio model is a big deal in the Japanese market. Like, it's usually one head artist and then a team of assistants underneath them who collaborate on all the the million different things you could come up with. Like a background expert, a face expert, that kind of stuff. So it's interesting. It's kind of interesting to me that you were able to find a studio that could do that kind of work. For you.
Yeah, it was one of those things where we were kind of shopping around for different people, and there's a lot of artists where you might like them, but they're tied up. I think if anything, their artists are always in demand. And so we were getting prices from different people and everything, and Chuck was just like, "Hey, why don't we see how much he wants, to do it?" Because now I have all these artists under him and everything. So, we just went back there for prices, and we're like, wow, it's just as good as anyone else. That's someone who we worked with before. We were really happy, with the working relationship we had before. So, hey, throw some more work their way.
Let me think. So we've talked a bit about your artist team. Talk a little bit about your the other writers you work with, and maybe the design process for Spearhead. How do you guys divide up that labor among yourselves?
Well, so with Sporkman conventions, there was mainly three of us from the very beginning working on Sporkman. It was me, Chuck Benetti, and our friend Chris Sylvia. And Chris and I, before we ever did Sporkman, we had actually talked about making our own comics before, because he had like an idea for a whole universe of his that was kind of like a fantasy thing, and I had a whole sci-fi thing I wanted to do, and I was making like little mini comic books on notepads like since I was in grade school. I actually still have some from as far back as 5th grade. Uh, Maybe one day I'll do the Adventures of Boulder Body again, but uh, yeah, very weird. But I was in 5th grade, and so we had actually talked about it a while, and we had done a lot of writing, and so Chris and I co-wrote um, conventions, which is why it's Barry, Sylvia, Ricarda, and we kind of all pitched in on the story, but was primarily me as writer and Chris, I guess, is like secondary writer. And so a lot of it was I would write, and then Chris might like come up with something that would be like funny that could be added to that. And so we kind of just build off of that. And conventions, it wrote fast. It was amazing how smooth and easy a process making conventions was from beginning to end. When we went to do Goes to Japan, we knew we were dealing with a bigger story. We wanted to fit a lot more things in it. It became more complex. And at that point, Chuck came on as secondary writer because he was a lot more familiar with anime and manga than Chris was, and even than I was. And so the two of us worked together on the story for that. And it was a little bit trickier because, like I said, we had so many different elements that we were trying to put in it. And then before Spearhead was even written, we've already written Sporkman on the High Seas, the next story. And that I was, once again, it was kind of like Chuck and I worked on the story, but most of the script was my work. And that's kind of how we did Spearhead. I had it originally was conceived of as like maybe a 4 or 5 page epilogue to Goes to Japan. And we thought, hey, you know what? If our crowdfund on Goes to Japan really blows up big and we have, tons of extra money laying around, this is something we'll add in the trade. And so it was just going to be a little bit of a chase scene with, her maybe like chasing, one of the other villains across the rooftop. If you read Goes to Japan, one of the villains is still free. And so it was basically going to be just a little foot chase and a little bit of dialogue, and that was it. And then we decided to expand it and put a little bit more meat on those bones. And so, it was going to be a little bit more dialogue heavy. But, I guess like the script writing is sort of the dialogue and stuff is a little bit more my strong suit. So, we worked together on some of the ideas, but like this one in particular was kind of expanded from that very, very, very minimalistic idea that I originally had. But as far as the rest of Spearhead, Chuck and I are going to be working a lot more hand in hand on that.
Okay, I can't resist. Is this a deliberate homage to Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, this judge with the big white beard?
Yes, I've never seen it, but Chuck specifically requested of the artist, said, I kind of want this to look like that.
Okay.
It doesn't make or break anything, but the the people that would recognize it as you obviously did, and the police cars in it are from you're under arrest, like
I don't
that.
know that one, but okay, nice.
Yeah, that was another one. Again, I haven't seen it, and Chuck's like, hey, if we're gonna have police cars, may as well throw that in there.
Nice. Get some more of those manga references snuck in places. Tell me a bit about the costume for Natsumi. Does that have any like cosplay or convention origins to it, or is it just like drawing it out and figuring it out on drawing paper?
Okay, so that was one thing I was really happy with. When we did Goes to Japan and conventions, maybe to a lesser degree, one thing we liked was we were able to give Gifney minimal direction on some stuff. Where, for example, like maybe like some of the body language that he would add in for Sporkman, like I didn't necessarily give him that. I gave him a script. He says this funny thing, and Gifney would like put in the body language, and it's like that's perfect. Like I wasn't even thinking in that much detail to give to him. And so with some of the characters, like Shogun Z, for example, I say he's kind of dressed like a samurai. So he does this sketch. I'm like, okay, well, instead of the little horns on the helmet, make it look like a Z.
Yeah.
That's like all the direction I had to give. For the character there, Tatsuo, we said, oh, we want this, kind of slick businessman type character. Like that's about all we told him. The eye patch was entirely his idea. That was not our idea.
And then it even gets referenced by Sporkman later.
Yeah, and I'm just like, this is awesome. Like I never thought to give him an eye patch, but Gifney threw it in there, and I loved it. I loved that he can think that way. And so we had told him about Natsumi, and we said, well, give us this anime girl, do a sketch of her in just like a regular outfit, and then do one in a anime cool sexy outfit type thing. And we gave him a couple references where we looked at like other anime characters, and we're like, we kind of want something like this, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Sent it to him, and he gave us a sketch, and we said, well, we want the more exaggerated eyes, the exaggerated big eyes on her.
Yeah.
Because that kind of makes it stand out from the other characters.
Which is even better because in Goes to Japan, Sporkman still has like the Western superhero drawing style,
right?
And she has the very manga drawing style. It's great.
So we definitely wanted to punch that up, and then when it came to the costume, I'm really happy because that is like almost entirely my design. It might even be in the trade where we got a lot of bonus stuff, but I actually sketched this dress where it kind of like crisscrosses the body, and like he added some of the other details like the tassels on the arms and the lace up footwear, stuff like that. But I kind of drew out like this basic spear design, and I did like the crisscross dress in it, and I said, yeah, this is kind of what we want to see in purple. So and she has long hair when her hair is down. So those were kind of the directions I gave him. So I'm really happy with the costume because that was something I feel like I contributed to a little bit more than just some minor direction.
So for people who enjoy Spearhead, is Sporkman on the High Seas coming out first, or are you going directly into the next Spearhead project after this one?
We're hoping to flip flop it, simply for the fact that like On the High Seas is just sitting there. That besides just doing a once over on the script again, it's pretty much sitting there, and that's probably going to be 3 issues worth of content. Okay. So we're hoping to alternate where we do like the first issue of On the High Seas, and while we're having that worked on, then we can be writing the first issue of Spearhead, and then go back and forth. And because we're working with a whole studio and the drawing styles are going to be a little bit different, we potentially can have the same studio possibly overlapping or simultaneously working on stuff. So, that's another nice little advantage we will hopefully end up in there.
So, okay, so they're actually able to transition from a very manga style like this to what was it the same studio that did Goes to Japan?
Ore Studios, but that was Gifney specifically. That was
No.
all him.
Gotcha. The individual artist did Goes to Japan, and then his studio is doing Spearhead. So he has some
Yeah.
input on it, but it's not just him individually working. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, because you might have some opportunity to, I don't know, have some stylistic similarities or pump up the manga aspect for the world of Japan, but maybe have it de-emphasized outside the world of Japan. That's it. That's really an interesting way of working. Do you have to communicate with the studio a lot for changes? It sounds like you trust them a lot for making some, design input decisions on your characters. So do you just in general have a more I trust my artist mentality, or do you like to, I don't know, give input or make changes as the process goes on?
I think it's one of those situations where it really depends on the character or the design, like how important it is. Obviously, if it's a main character, you're going to be a little bit more precious with it than not. For example, the one piece of input that Chuck had about the way Natsumi was drawn when we first got the sketches was to just soften the chin. You know how some manga, like their chin, you could like cut yourself on their chin. It's so pointed.
Yeah.
And so that was like something really minor. But obviously, she's the main character, so we're going to tend to be a little bit more precious with that. But as far as a lot of things go, I tend not to nitpick about stuff. Oh well, and in some cases, there's been times where something was drawn a little bit differently than what I intended, and I go, yeah, it looks good. Okay. For example, in one of the pages there's like these 3 Robo Scorpions. In the script, it was actually only just supposed to be 1.
Okay.
And
Wow.
and Chuck and for whatever reason, he thought we meant multiple. And Chuck and I looked at it and we're like, okay, it's more of a threat. It doesn't really change the story.
Yeah.
The story is going to be still written exactly the same. Hey, let's have it 3 Robo Scorpions. As a matter of fact, it makes more sense for us to do it that way. And then there's other cases where the way I kind of see it is a little bit like the relationship between movie studios and directors, where sometimes it's best if the studio just says, we hired you as a director because we trust your vision. So do what you do best, and we're going to shut up and do what we do best.
Right.
So, that's kind of the way I approach it is unless I think it's something where I'm just like, yeah, it just doesn't work. Uh, you know, I generally am for letting the artist do what they know how to do. That's why I'm hiring them.
Kind of reminds me of the Stan Lee method, where he'd famously wait to letter until the art was all done, or to write the words after the artistic part was done.
Yeah, and if you have an artist that really knows what they're doing, and they have the script and stuff, hopefully they're able to kind of guesstimate how much room is needed so that you can put the text in and it's not going to be covering up some of the art and everything.
All right. So this first issue is going to be 20 pages. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, which we intended to try to do one around 15 or 16 pages. And when I started breaking down, okay, what's going to be able to fit on each page, I told Chuck, I said, well, it looks like it's going to be more like 18. And then I'm like, okay, it's going to have to be 20. And that's something that I think is a real challenge because if you're talking about the written word, who cares if it's 501 pages versus
Right.
500, right? That costs the piece of paper. It doesn't really cost a lot to have it written for the author. And if you're doing a movie, granted, every minute of film can be considerably a more amount of money, but if it's integral to the story, you know what? Okay, put the camera there and shoot.
Yeah.
But a minute is still a minute is a minute, regardless what you're looking at. Where when you're doing it on a comic page, it's a little bit different because you're having to fit a certain amount of quote unquote shots on a page. And so it's not like you could do it a direct translation like a movie, because there you're talking about time where you're limited to space. And so if you're one frame off and you add a whole page, you're like, oh, I just had to add a whole page for one shot and there's no reason for it to be a whole page. That could really screw up, everything around it. So you really have to kind of learn how much room you have for different things, what shots are important. I've seen some cases where, a comic page will have 20 frames, and it'll be so small where it's like, well, you're not getting any art.
Yeah.
Or the art isn't that impressive because you have 10 people in a frame the size of an inch because there wasn't enough room to deal with more. And I tend to err on the side of making sure I have enough space versus, well, we have to do it in X amount of pages, so we're going to, cram it in. I'd rather say, hey, let's add a page if we have to. Yes, it adds cost, but I care about the final product. So
Now, Goes to Japan, they're a little thicker. Are they about like 40-page issues combining to the trade paperback?
they're 32.
Okay.
Well, the first two issues are 32 pages, and then the third one is 28.
Okay.
And we originally thought, hey, we're going to do another one shot. And then we're like, nah, we have too much. This is going to have to be two. And so that was a case where
The
partway
story demanded it, really. Yeah.
I was also storyboarding it, and I was storyboarding it differently than I did Spearhead. And so I was trying to basically draw up, and I would just throw in little stick figures like, okay, this image is kind of this image is kind of this. And it turned out that what was going to be our midpoint between issue 1 and 2 was like halfway through issue 2 where that would land. And we're like, we really need a third issue. There's no way we can fit all this stuff. And, we were already running into having it, each issue oversized. And so by the time we did 3, I diverted more of the storyboarding over to our artist and just said, look, you know, this ain't my thing. I think in film terms. The camera is on this character talking, then it's on this, action piece or whatever. And so I was more loosey-goosey and kind of let him do a little bit more of the storyboarding on that third issue. And, still that was, 28 pages. So we have 3 oversized issues to do Goes to Japan. And probably we could have made it a 4th if we had wanted to stretch things out. There was actually one piece of artwork that we included it in the back of the limited edition trade that was going to be initially the first page of issue 2, because we always started our issues with a full piece page. And so we already had that made for that scene. And then when we said, oh man, everything's going to be shifting, we had basically an obsolete page.
But you find ways to make use of it, like bonus illustrations and things like that. Fan art sections, yeah. that helps increase the page count. All right. Any fan art submissions for Spearhead specifically yet?
No, I'd love to see some.
Okay.
If I can, for people that don't know the whole backstory, could I give a little bit of that? Talk a little bit
Yeah,
about
go
that.
ahead.
Okay, so if I was pitching Spearhead as just a standalone and what she's all about, without having to tie it directly to Japan. Natsumi, who's the main character, she works for an organization in Japan called the ADF, which is Japan's Advanced Defense Force. And their whole job is to combat threats that are beyond what law enforcement or the military or something like that can handle. So, for example, they would be combating threats that involve some sort of high technology, like super robots, things like that, kaiju, and any beings with like superpowers. So in Goes to Japan, he actually traded places with some superheroes from Japan called the
The
Karate
karate
Chop.
chopsticks.
Yeah. So, and they weren't in it because they were taking his place in the United States. They will show up at some point in Spearhead because obviously now they're back in their home country. So yeah, so she works for this organization, the ADF, and we start diving a lot more into Natsumi's backstory because we had in Japan another character named Reiko who was a spy at the ADF, and her and Natsumi, they're enemies, and we're going to go into their story a lot more, and you're going to go all the way back to some of Natsumi's childhood. We're going to be exploring, why does she carry a battle staff? Like, what's that all about anyway? That there is a story behind all that. And so we're going to be exploring not just her backstory, but where she potentially, like, her destiny lies.
Talk a bit about Mocha Pine, the, the little rabbits that hate Sporkman so much.
Yeah, so when we were doing Japan, we were just like making lists of like, what do you have in manga? Oh, speed lines. Okay, we have to have giant robots, and at some point there has to be some sort of kaiju, and we were like, okay, well, what can we do with Pokemon? And obviously, we can't call them Pokemon. It's a spoof. So and that was actually a design that I drew, and I was like, well, it's got to be cute. Okay, it will be like some ball-shaped rabbit thing with like this little fluffy ball tail, a little bit like a popple. I think they had tails like that, and so it's pretty much a straight-up adaptation of my less nice-looking sketch that I provided for that. So we're like, okay, these are just a thing over in Japan. Like, people have them as pets, and the ADF has them around for security, obviously, in their little Moki Pond tubes, like, a habit trail, and they just go all over that building. They can run through this like whole habit trail thing. So yeah, the Spearhead we'll see Moki Ponds again because in our universe they're a thing.
I wish I could show it. So there would be a Mocha Pond on the front of issue 1 of Sporkman Goes to Japan, but it's just cut off. All right, so that's another reason for people to get the digital catch up or the physical catch up if they haven't gotten that for Sporkman yet. All right, well, talk a bit about maybe like challenges or work you still have to do behind the scenes. I'm assuming that the first 5 pages are complete, so you're still in the process of working on the art with the studio for Spearhead, right?
Yeah, so right now the only thing keeping us from finishing is getting it funded. We had enough money, and we wanted to have something. Obviously, you want someone to give you money for a campaign, you have to show them some sort of product. So we said, what can we afford? Let's do 5 pages and the cover. Obviously, the cover is going to be your big attention grabber. So we've paid for that. All the script is done. All the storyboarding, as far as like the format that I gave them, is done. It is, and Chuck is doing the lettering. He actually taught himself lettering because we went back and we redid pretty much all the lettering and word balloons and stuff for Ghost to Japan and spruce it up and make it a little bit better. So he's actually going to be doing all the lettering and sound effects and stuff. So he has 5 pages that he can actively work on. As far as the other 15 pages to finish it up, it is purely waiting on us to get the money in and fund, and then we're just going to give the green light for the artists to start doing the next ones. So we don't anticipate, unless it's something out of the ordinary, obviously, we don't anticipate there to be like really any delays. The printer we talked to right now, they're not really backlogged. They said their turnaround, I think, might be like 2 weeks, maybe.
Nice.
So, we're all ready to go. We're just waiting for the backers to come in.
Okay, very very much. The dream of crowdfunding is to make the project happen. So you're at 11% and 21 days to go. So 3 weeks to go. So
yeah, we're definitely way behind what we thought we would be because we had like at least 100 backers on previous campaigns. So we were hoping a lot of them come back, and so we're definitely under what we wanted to be. We hope it'll pick up at some point because honestly, and this isn't just coming from me, but for like a lot of other indie creators, I often think of the fact that some of these people could be the people that have $1 million ideas, that have characters or universes they came up with that could be the next Batman or be the next Spider-Man. But the problem is people, and this is just human nature, but people will always gravitate towards what they know.
Right.
So when you're at a comic convention and you're trying to pitch someone, I said it's like fishing, and you're just slowly reeling them in. And if they seem interested in your product, you're just there. Oh, come on. I'm reeling them in on a book that I'm trying to sell for like $4 or $5, and I'm lucky if I make $1.50 off it, by the time all said and done. And you're reeling them in, and just when you think you might have one to hook, they go, well, I hope you have a lot of good luck with that. And then they go next door and they buy their 5,000th issue of Batman.
Right.
It's
like, we need that meme of the saint. I think it's like St. Paul or something. And his inspired word is support your friends, your creative friends, like you support corporations that hate you.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. People will say, I don't like the way this thing is or that thing. But when alternatives are provided, well, then you have to explore them, and you have to open up your horizons a bit to some new stuff because you might love it. And I'm sure, just like we have more stories we want to be able to tell, and obviously that requires money to get the art done. I'm sure there's a lot of other creators in the same situation that have, whole universes they want to explore, and they're like, oh man, it'd be great. I want to tell this story's, I want to tell this character's story and everything. I know that sci-fi universe, that I mentioned years ago that I had started developing. That's still a story with that character and those characters. I still want to tell. I still want to tell that story at some point. But it's like you have to kind of build a following, and that's really difficult, especially in today's world, because there are so many options and distractions. I mean, you just look at like sci-fi, fantasy, that kind of stuff was always, well, it wasn't really mainstream and it tended not to do that well. And there wasn't a lot. I mean, you think back in the 80s and 90s, there was some absolute garbage stuff that we would watch, and we were happy to watch it because we were starving
other stuff.
for it.
Yeah.
It's like you're in the middle of a desert if someone offers you a piss in a cup, you take it. You know what I mean? Because you're just thirsting to death. And now, with all the different networks and stuff like that, there's more content than ever before, to the point where now, like, there's not enough time in the day to absorb it all. So all the creators become smaller and smaller needles in an ever-growing haystack. It makes it really, really, really hard to get eyes on anything that anyone does that is not, a major billion-dollar company that can afford to put ads in front of literally everything you see.
Tell me a bit about some of the posters. Let's see if I can get a window up for that. So you've got like one by Ginger Foxy, and I'm guessing you have a poster of the normal cover art too, right?
Yeah, if you go to the main website, getspork.com, and go to merchandise and scroll down, we have all the posters there. You can bring them up then.
Okay. I'll try that. So
Yeah,
I've seen Ginger Foxy's name come up before. Has that artist done work for you before?
She was our colorist on Goes to Japan, because we had conventions and Goes to Japan. Like, we had them done for, like I said, like 10 years or more. And when Chuck and I were talking about, you know what, we've been talking about it for years. We really want to relaunch Sporkman. And we said, well, rather than spend a lot of money on something that doesn't exist yet, most people have never heard of it. So let's make it the very best we can. And so first we paid to get conventions colorized, and then we paid to get Japan colorized, and Ginger Foxy colorized Goes to Japan. And I think, like, her particular style and color palette just really, really, really worked. Really made everything pop. And it was like, once we saw it in color, the black and white felt unfinished by comparison. So if you scroll up to the other one, not Sumi, that one there, Ginger Foxy did. And I love that art piece. Chuck and I are both really, really happy with it.
Nice. So this is one they can get as an add-on perk on the Indiegogo campaign.
I think, no, you know what? I'm not sure if the posters are available as add-ons or not. Because I know one of it could be. I know one of the issues we had with the posters previously is that we didn't want to fold them. There were some people that got them and they're like, oh, I just kind of automatically expected it to be folded. I'm like, you're buying a piece of art. I'm not going to fold it.
Yeah.
I'm going to treat it like a piece of art. Well, that meant we had to buy poster tubes. There was a cost. We had to ship it separately than, say, something flat like the actual book. So, okay, now it's more shipping. And it ended up just being a little bit of a pain in the butt. So if they are as add-ons, it's probably because they were calculated as being shipped as a separate item. I didn't remember if they were there or not.
Okay. I think it's the Ginger Foxy one I saw, and then the Spearhead cover art, kind of like Virgin cover art.
Yeah. We'll eventually make the cover for Spearhead. We'll eventually, like, have that with the title not on it and stuff, and eventually make that available as a poster too. To me, it's like all our covers are a piece of art, and I have like all our covers up on a wall in our hallway, so it's like you get all the different covers. Now we haven't, and we don't intend to, but the cover for the trade, which was like very limited, that was by Brad Ashworth. We don't have any plans right now to do that as a poster. And I'm trying to think. We have another issue that originally was released as an ash can called Sporkman to the Rescue. We never released that as a poster because it was just red background with the Spork emblem, and it just has like "To the Rescue" written on it. So we never released it that way. But
Okay, maybe as a little bonus in a future trade paperback or something.
yeah, at some point we may release more of the ash can, where it's just like stapled together and everything.
That's very indie comics. Yeah, the whole zine scene.
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
maybe talk about conventions a little bit, because going to a convention was a big part of the origin of the character. Do you find that useful? Like, have you found sci-fi conventions, anime conventions, maybe like comic and indie zine conventions? Do you still use that as a way of trying to talk? I guess COVID shut it down a lot of that, but are you finding those avenues still post COVID?
Yeah, well, so when it comes to the convention thing, it is if all you're selling is comics and maybe a few pieces of merchandise like poster prints and stuff, it is damn hard to even break even. Because there's small little comic shows that might be like 6 hours long on one day, and they want, $100 for an artist table. And
Yeah,
it's like, how many freaking books do I got to move just to break even? At
right.
that point, is it really worth it? Well, unless you have money to burn, not really. Um, Now, there's a convention my wife and I, the last 2 years we weren't able to do it, but there's an anime convention we do pretty much every year. And when we would go there, if we had the space available, we also made a little corner to display the comics or t-shirts or whatever so that we could kind of move it, but we never exclusively tried to sell the comic. It was always putting it on table with my business. um the only time we've ever exclusively uh tried to sell the comic with an artist's table was at one that had been local to us, and the woman who ran it, she did not know what the hell she was doing. It was a mess. Like, I don't even think we sold a single book. And like the room all the artists were in, like all the tables were facing the same way, and so people had to like squeeze behind an artist's chair to look at the table that was behind them. It was bizarre. And
Yeah.
the lighting was really low in the room, so like you could hardly see anything. That whole convention, it never came back because it was a crap show.
Right. I mean,
Um,
but then there's the opposite problem where if you try to go to San Diego Comic Con, it's basically like Warner Brothers and Disney are gobbling up all the space. So there's
yeah,
been
yeah.
right.
Well, and the cost, I'm sure, is insane. Not to mention your travel, all that. The ones we have done, there
Okay,
was
Sporkman Studio says you did Steel City in Baltimore.
I totally forgot about Steel City. Now, Steel City is primarily a toy collectible show, but they also do have an artist alley. And quite honestly, the weird thing is, I couldn't even tell you whether we did good or bad at it. Like, I just don't even remember it. I totally forgot we did Steel City. I think we might have only done it once. Uh, and we did uh, twice a number of years ago. And I'm talking a number of years ago, probably like almost 10 at this point. We did Baltimore Comic Con. And the one year at Baltimore Comic Con, we actually broke even. And the only thing not making us break even was we were driving from my place down to Baltimore and back every single day because it was still cheaper than a hotel room.
Yeah.
Which I don't know about that now. Maybe a hotel room would be cheaper. So we did that, and we were pretty happy with that. We wanted to go back this year, but I think last time we were there, the artist tables were like maybe 150. They're 300 now. And so we're like, that, unless we had 10 different books out or something, that's a little risky. We probably would not make our money back. So we're passing on that. Now, 2019, I went with a friend to. It was a Philadelphia Comic Con, but I don't know if it was Philly Comic-Con, because I think there's two and the names are very similar. This one was held more near King of Prussia rather than like downtown Philly, where Wizard World Philly is held. That one we did okay, and I think we would have done better, but for whatever reason, they put us in this really weird spot. So all the Artist Alley people were kind of in the same area, and because the convention kind of screwed things up, they had to find us a space, and the space we were in, we were not surrounded by any artists. We were surrounded by like some oddball vendors, and like one was like hardly ever at his booth, so it would be very easy for someone to be walking down the center aisle. They look to their left, and we're down there, but there's almost nothing else down there, so they go, there's nothing down there, and don't go down there. So.
Tell me about okay, so talk a little bit about what you've learned doing the indie scene, doing the self-promotion. So I'm guessing, like my channel, you're probably going to start having to do the YouTube channel touring. What's the YouTube comics scene like these days? Are you finding, I know like Tyler's got Draw and Talk. Are you finding some good venues there?
Well, we're lined up for 2 more at least. I think we might have 3 maybe lined up online, which is good. It's really different because back when we did conventions and even goes to Japan, crowdfunding was like, there were whispers of this thing called Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So it was not really a thing. Like no one had heard of crowdfunding. And so that was a totally different time. And yeah, the internet was around, but to a degree, it was still, I wouldn't say in the internet's infancy, but maybe in its teen years, you could say. More companies were starting to have websites and things like that. But digital comics, that was a thing that was, I think we may have actually been at one of the, it might have been the first Baltimore Comic-Con we went to. There was actually a company, I don't even think they're around anymore, but they were talking about adapting phone apps, because I don't think iPad was even around, but there were smartphones, and they were developing this app to get comics on phone. And so when we were doing all this stuff before, all these outlets didn't even exist, or they were just being developed. So now it is a lot different. Social networking, I think back then, I don't even think MySpace existed. I think we had all 4 comics out before MySpace even came out.
Wow.
Yeah, so so a lot of the creators now doing stuff, they have a totally different tool set that we did not have at all. And Chuck is really the one that has done a lot more of building the social network. Like he's actually told me, he goes, Eric, he goes, you realize there's people that don't know you exist? Because he talks so much to the people in that community that I don't, because I don't use, to me, social media anymore is a necessary evil. And I occasionally go on to like plug, my business pages and things like that. But I'm not a lurker. And so Chuck's like, yeah, people are always like surprised when I tell them that, I have this co-writer and stuff like that, because they don't know who you are, because he's been building all these different social media platforms. So that's something I'm trying to do a little bit more of on my end, do the promotion. But it is really tough because
the Metal has given you or your partner the opportunity to come on the Vomitorium, and he's the creator of X Dynamis Chaos. If you don't know him, I dig that. I feel like there could be a Sporkman the Metal crossover. I feel like you guys could potentially be on the same crazy wavelength energy for indie comics, but the Metal has sent out an offer if you're interested.
Yeah, I like the for me, I have no problem with the promotion. Like I've told Chuck, I'm like, hey, I will be on any show. I don't care. I love to talk. I don't mind promoting. I love to talk about the craft. Um, I'm just not one of those people where I have a whole lot of time to just like I said, like kind of lurk and move around and stuff like that. I'm more the type of person that's like, nah, I just want to sit down and have a conversation and talk geeky stuff. I don't care, man. I'm all about that. Um, but yeah, we have had some times where like I said with the campaign, we expected to be doing a little bit better, and there's sometimes we just quite frankly get frustrated because we can look at another campaign and it's like doing gangbusters, and we're trying to like figure out what the formula is and finding out there doesn't really seem to be one. Like there's certain things you don't do. For example, if someone say, you don't talk down to your customers. Obviously, you don't say, "Well, screw you," if you don't want to back my campaign. There's it's easy to say the things you never want to do or you
Right.
shouldn't do.
Yeah. Like
But
the whole weird YouTube comic drama subculture, right? Like you
right,
guys seem
right.
to have mostly successfully stayed out of that, right?
But the idea of what do you do to become successful, you could probably interview multiple people and they might have one or two things in common that they did. But then there's other like things where someone will be like, "Yeah, never use social media at all. I used a mailing list." And it's like if I try to use a mailing list, what would happen? 90% of them would end up in someone's spam filter because I emailed too many people. you know it's like, how are you getting the mailing list to work? And then there's another person that's like, I never used a mailing list. I use nothing but social media. And one might say they only use Twitter and they were successful. And so it's really weird, and there doesn't really seem to be any equation where someone can sit down and say, if I do exactly what this other person did, it's going to work.
Yeah.
So
You
that
have to
makes
explore multiple spaces. Yeah.
right. And so I've been doing a lot of trying to think outside the box where I'm like, okay, what's something we didn't even think of? Because we might get to a point where we say, well, we've exhausted everything we know to do. Well, now where do we go from there? And so I've given a lot of thought into you know human psychology, like what draws someone's attention, what gets them to stop and look. We live in a social media culture where unless something pops out of their phone screen and slaps them across the head and gives them a boot to the ass, like they're just like scroll, 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 scroll. It's like the whole world has turned, ADD or something, and trying to get people's eye on something is really, really tough. And it's even tougher, I think, to a degree when you're talking about comics and things of that nature. I can't show a video of someone, doing a cool stunt on a bike. I'm trying to show them a still image and getting them excited about that. So, yeah, as far as the promotion end goes with all the online stuff, I'm a little bit in the situation where I can't tell you what works or what
Yeah.
doesn't right now.
You
We're
need a
still trying to
meme.
figure it out.
You need one Sporkman meme to go crazy on TikTok with all the Zoomers or something.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's so crazy. Like, you take a look at some various viral things, like, okay, for one, Grumpy Cat.
Yeah.
You know, this woman happens to have a cat with a funny looking face, and that is like $1 million idea.
Yeah.
Who would think about that?
I've been wanting to get into Storytime comics YouTube. I don't know, but the thing is, it's the same thing. Where if you do Star Wars and Disney comics, or Marvel DC, there's a market for that. But then there's also a market for I have seen a market for like weird little indie comics where someone will just do like a 4-panel gag strip and some voice actor will reenact the comic strip, and that'll do big numbers on YouTube. So it's just constantly, I don't know, maybe you need that entrepreneur mindset where there are not suckers. There's people out there eager to support something, people with money out there, and you've got to somehow get yourself. Oh, that's the old saying. You have to tell someone something 7 different times in 7 different ways before they remember to actually buy the thing.
I think it's for radio. They say it's like 14. So it's like that's why you get commercial. Come down to Mattress Warehouse. Check out everything we have to sell at Mattress Warehouse. This weekend at Mattress Warehouse, we're having a sale at Mattress Warehouse.
Yeah.
Because it tends to stick in your brain. So yeah, I agree. There is that going on where it has to be repetitive. I mean, that's why, movies, everywhere you go, you walk into a grocery store, hey, here's a bag of chips with Minions on it. What does that have to do with a movie? Well, it doesn't matter. They just need it to be in your brain 24/7 so you don't forget it. And obviously, there's whole industries built up around marketing. And once again with movies, they say, like, if you have a movie that's $100 million, on top of that they spend an average of 50 million on advertising. Well, that's a lot of money just to get people to not forget your product,
Or if you're George Lucas, you can get Pepsi to pay you for the right to put Star Wars characters on their cans to advertise your movie for you.
Well, I think there's also a certain thing that happens when it comes to promotion where, and this partially has to do with like the various algorithms and stuff like that. The more popular something is, the more it will direct eyes towards it. So you end up with it's almost like a snowball rolling down a hill.
Yeah.
And for every one snowflake that sticks to that ball, that's going to pick up 5 more. And those 5 are going to pick up 10 more, or whatever. So it becomes like this exponential tornado that just keeps building and building. And all the person had to do initially was break a certain threshold. They only had to do so much, and it almost becomes like, some sort of nuclear fusion that you put a certain amount of energy into it and suddenly it's self-sustaining.
Right.
But it's like breaking that threshold is the trick.
Try some Spork Flake cereal today. Enjoy the sweet New Balance breakfast that comes with its own giant cereal spork, says
quite honestly, Sporkman, it would be perfect for a goofy cereal idea. And every box would come with like a free plastic spork. That would be actually that would be perfect.
Very inexpensive merchandising option. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be. All you do is just say, hey, you just put our character on a box. I don't care what you make the cereal looks like. Put it on a box. After all, C-3POs, I think, looked like a digital number 8 for some reason, I ate so much of that as a kid.
Nice.
Hey, all they had to do was put something Star Wars on it. I would have eaten Darth Vader's. I would have eaten Chewbacca's. I wouldn't have cared. I ate the Pepperidge Farms, Return of the Jedi cookies. I didn't care. They put Star Wars on it. I was going to eat that.
No, okay. Would that have been the original trilogy era, or would that have been prequel trilogy era?
Oh, that was original, because the Pepperidge Farms were after Return of the Jedi. C-3POs, I think, were maybe around Jedi, maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit after. I ate so many boxes of that. I think it was they were running like a contest with Toys R Us, and the top prize was $1,000 Toys R Us shopping spree.
Nice.
But I did eat enough of that cereal that I won one of the lower end prizes, which was I'm a Toys R Us kid T-shirt.
You got a T-shirt. I ate 1,000 boxes, and all I got was this Toys R Us T-shirt.
Yeah, all I got was a stupid T-shirt. The next prize up, the mid-level prize, was like a 10-speed bike or something, and then the high prize was $1,000 shopping spree. And it's so stupid. Like, I remember stupid stuff as a kid. There's things people would remind me that didn't just happen when I was a teenager, but that I did as a teenager, and I'd be like, what? I don't even totally remember that. Why would I do something like that? And they're like, oh yeah, it was hilarious, you know. But then I will remember stupid shit from when I was in grade school, like eating those and winning that T-shirt. It's weird.
Oh, speaking of T-shirts, people have got to get the my T-shirt can beat up your T-shirt from getspork.com. I
Yeah,
love that one.
we actually we had a total of 4 T-shirts from our T-shirt run. And we actually sold 2 of them today. Chuck and I were actually doing a appearance at a comic book shop, and we actually sold 2 of the T-shirts there. We haven't really been stocking them because the problem with any sort of apparel is even if they sell well, you're going to have someone that says, you don't have my size or you don't have the color I want. And so to try to always have every single size and every single color and every sort of art image on it is ridiculous, because if you want to buy one and you don't have that size, you go to the T-shirt place and they're like, yes, minimum order 20. And you're like, oh great, I'm throwing down money to order 20 T-shirts in order to sell one. So we've moved to like a print on demand model. A lot of
Yeah.
it's
Have you looked
Redbubble.
into like Redbubble or TeePublic, any of those kinds of sites?
I think we have it on 2 sites. Maybe Cafe Press might be one. I know Redbubble we do, and that's one of those sites where you can say, yeah, give me this image on a cell phone case or a T-shirt or whatever. The downside is everything becomes really expensive because they're doing all this setup to do a one-off. And on our end, we don't make jack. Like a T-shirt that normally we could sell for like $14 may cost you $25 through them, and it's like, woohoo, we made $1.50.
Yeah.
So our profit margin, if we got them done ourselves, would be way higher. However, we don't have the money to stockpile T-shirts.
Right.
So that is the catch-22. So right now, the my shirt can beat up your shirt. We literally only have 2 of them left, both of them in black, and both of them in triple XL.
Well, it makes a nice pajama shirt. Nice
Yeah.
tint.
Well, we got those because we had people that kept saying, oh, no, I need a really big size. So we ordered a bunch of really big sizes, and now we're stuck with a bunch of really big sizes. Or stuck with 2 of them right now.
All right, so it's a limited edition, special option. Metal says, "Yeah, I use Redbubble, but that's only a passive thing. So people who insist on having merch, yeah, it kind of like it runs itself in the background, which is a nice angle, even if the profit margins aren't as good."
Yeah, and the sad thing is, unfortunately, the merchandise is what makes all the money.
Yeah,
You know, it's kind of like if you can sell enough merchandise, hey, you can actually afford to make your books, to make your stories, to make someone interested in buying your merch. So, you know, it's like even DC and Marvel, they aren't making anything on their comics. They're making it on the fact that people will spend, you know, they can make millions of dollars because you go to see the movie, or you buy the T-shirts, or you buy the statues or the action figures. But initially, and that again, like I said, is almost one of those threshold things where you first need to have the stories that people give a crap about the character for them to buy the merch.
right.
But once you reach a certain point, you honestly don't even have to make stories anymore, and probably you're still good for another 10 years that people will be buying all the merch. I mean, if tomorrow they said no more Batman comics, no more Spider-Man comics.
Oh, they're going to be fine on
Underoos
alone. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. They could just sell everything else and it'd be good. but you initially have to draw people in with a story somehow. Whether it's comics, whether it's animation, whether it's movies, you have to have a story. I've seen cool stuff all the times, action figures that might be an original design that's like, yeah, it's like really cool looking, but hey, I'll go buy this Optimus Prime or whatever because I'm a
Right.
fan of Optimus Prime and I know his character and background. And it's even similar for my prop work that I do, which is like my main business is making props and model kits and stuff. And there's original items that I would make. And I could take them to dozens of shows. And everyone's like, oh, this is so cool.
But
And it takes me
price.
7 years to sell one.
Yeah.
Why? Because they'd rather buy that Han Solo blaster
Right.
than the thing that is just a cool thing.
Talk a bit about, so does your team have like an internet meme person, right? I feel like that's become a big thing pretty recently, is the meme game is part of how you kind of get out into the really like ADHD space. Is that an angle you've explored at all?
No, not really. And I'm one of those people. I've never really learned Photoshop or anything like that. Like my talent isn't much beyond MS Paint.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, but then again, that's where all the great memes come from, is MS Paint.
right, right. So, like, I'm not all that good with stuff. Now, one thing I'm very happy about, the title for Spearhead, I actually drew that.
Oh,
And
let me grab that.
so, yeah, probably if you scroll up to one of them.
There we go.
So that was something where, like, do we want to pay someone to make a logo? And I said, okay, well, let me take a crack at making my own font. Okay. Now, here's where my background lies. AutoCAD. I'm more like, I used to draw a lot when I was little, but I could never make a comic that was worth selling. you know, like my arms on human characters look like they're attached to the front of their chest. It's like,
Right.
I can't draw organic stuff well compared to technical things. So the Spearhead logo, I actually drew that in AutoCAD. And then I gave it to Chuck, and he added all the colors to it. So I love the fact that we were actually able to do our title in house. But as far as the the heavy graphics program, Chuck knows that stuff a lot more than I do. And so unfortunately, we're in a situation where we don't have a lot of, I don't know if you would call it bonus, but like some artists, they have a lot of additional art that they can like do a sketch of their character and release that, and do a sketch of another character and release that, kind of just to draw up interest. Where Chuck and I, neither one of us really have the ability to do that. So if we wanted too much of that, it means we're going to have to find someone to pay to do that kind of work just for promotion purposes. Where me, I'm more about what can we do in relation to video, what can we do in relation to audio, because Chuck and I originally, that's where our interest was filmmaking. And we even have, like, on our Sporkman Studios channel, there's a short called Mythbursters that we did years ago. And, like that, I did all the editing for that. And my wife did the music for it. And, we had friends acting in it and everything. So that's kind of our background and where I think our strength lies a little bit more. So when it comes to doing promotional stuff like the promo video for Spearhead, that was something I put together. So that's what I think we can do a little bit better than maybe some of the meme stuff.
Yeah. Right. Everybody has to find their own area of expertise, basically. Neostar says, I'm fairly confident at Photoshop and design, but I couldn't make a meme if it got me a Tim Lim commission. I feel like memes though is the most democratic thing on earth, right? Like draw an MS Paint, type some text on it. I don't know. Maybe that's a theory I still have to work out a little bit more. Crack the meme code secret for advertising indie comics.
Like if it was something of just taking, say, like a photo and adding a word balloon to it or something like that. Now that I could do. You know, I've done some minor stuff like that. But here is something fairly straightforward, and I think Chris might have done it. I don't even think I did it or Chuck did it. But the my shirt can beat up your shirt. That particular image of him pointing came from a frame off Conventions.
Yeah.
Where he's doing that, and because we didn't want to pay for extra art, and we're like, well, what art do we have that we could use on a t-shirt? And so we're like, okay, well, let's just have Sporkman saying something funny. And Chris was like, how about my shirt can beat up your shirt? And we're like, okay, there we go. It didn't really cost us anything extra.
Any other things you've learned from the process of making and advertising Sporkman that you think would be good for independent comic creators to know? Like, share your wisdom with the young Zoomer comic makers.
Oh, like I said, man, I wish someone would share their wisdom with me, because but I have spent a lot of time with launching this campaign of looking at, just like doing Google searches, like crowdfund promotion and stuff like that. And you have to watch out, because some of the tips you're given are usually people talking about specific products, like you're making an electric scooter. Well, obviously, how you promote that is way different than how you would promote a comic. But then, there's some common sense tips, like find out where your demographic is to to advertise to them that way. So there are those things that any campaign needs to know where your demographic is, is the most common. But we're still learning, and I'm trying to absorb any tips I can. Any articles I can find on people that successfully crowdfunded comics. Okay, how'd they do it? And like I said, some of the frustrating thing is when they say, do these 5 things, and you go, okay, I'm doing these 5 things. How is it within the first 3 hours you fully funded your, $10,000 goal? If I had to take a guess, I would say sorcery.
Right.
Because your the whole phrase, your mileage may vary. It's like, okay, I understand varying, but that big of a variation? Obviously you tapped into some sort of magic, or you're using the Force or something.
Right. Or maybe the dark side of the Force.
Yeah, you're using Jedi mind tricks you will fund my comic, because we've seen situations like that where people, they're like, oh, the very first campaign I did fully funded in 3 hours, and their goal is higher than ours. And it's like, we actually have shown that we can fulfill campaigns. We've done it before. We have comics that we did 15 years ago before half these things were even available to us. Okay, why is one funding more than the other? And I couldn't tell you that there is a magic bullet. But I would tell people, think outside the box, because there could be an idea out there that nobody has thought of yet, and it is really, really successful to you. So don't discount something just out of hand and say that'll never work. I would always say another rule of thumb is ask. The worst someone can say is no. And then you're no worse off. Unless you told them off and flipped them the bird when they told you no, know? don't burn any bridges, but ask. The worst that can happen is they say no. Um, there's a website which actually, as soon as I'm done here, I need to write something to them. But while I was doing this research, I came across an article that I read on this website, and the website wasn't even really geared towards comics, but they had an article about crowdfunding independent comics. And so I thought, what the heck? I emailed them and I said, hey, I came across this article on your site. I'm also an indie comic creator. Is there anything we could do to get promotion on your site? Guy writes back to me, I'd love to help. Write a 400 to 700 word op-ed and I'll put it up on our site. And hopefully I'll be able to tell people where they can find that, after the weekend's over. That was a total shot in the dark. It wasn't like I went to even a specifically comic related website and they were willing to help.
Talking
So
to like small shops that maybe have like one person in charge. It's better than trying to get through like the corporate wall of a big place. Yeah.
Yeah, that I honestly think is harder. If, for example, if you just called up Walmart and said, hey, I want you to carry my indie comic, it's just going to be difficult to know who to even connect to, just because the company's so big. They're going to be like, I don't know. You just called the store number. I can put you on hold for 10 minutes and connect you with entertainment. And you're like, no. So you can run into those issues. But by the same token, Walmart, there's been some where I've seen indie comics. I forget. I forget.
The Allegiance Arts books were at Walmart for a while.
Yeah. So it's like, hey, probably most people would say, yeah, you're never going to get it in there. Well, someone did. Someone actually said the worst that can happen is they say no. So that I say is an attitude you have to have. Think outside the box. The worst that can happen is someone says no on an idea. And the other thing I would say, and I almost did a stream about this, and Friday Chuck and I hit like 8 different comic shops or something like that all over our state. Just, hey, will you put this flyer out for a campaign? Will you put this flyer out? Most were happy to do it. We didn't get any that told us to take a hike or anything like that. But one thing, and it's not just with comic shops, but really with anything, and it is a human nature thing to always keep in mind. And the way I would title this is nobody cares about your indie comic.
Yeah.
It comes down to the fact that everybody, myself included, everybody ultimately works in their best interest. So the comic guy that doesn't want to carry your book or whatever, or doesn't really care about, putting up a flyer for you, the thing you need to remember is if he's doing this for you, it's just to be nice. But ultimately, he cares about keeping his doors open.
Yeah.
And your indie comic, if you're getting all the money, you're not doing jack for his business. If he is getting a cut of it, you're still taking up shelf space, and he's going to be lucky to move your indie comic. He's going to be putting his resources behind what's going to make him money. That doesn't make him greedy. That just makes him want to keep his doors open. It's probably why he's selling a bunch of crap Funko Pops that are, in my opinion, they're garbage collectibles.
Oh yeah.
Hey,
Soy Jack meme Funko Pops. Yeah.
I won't tell people what they should buy, or if I won't tell them they're not allowed to like them. I think they're garbage collectibles. But the thing is, those stupid things are probably keeping his doors open as much, if not more so, than the books are.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what he cares about. He wants to provide for his family. He wants to keep his business open. So while it might seem where you go, oh, these people just don't care. They don't want to support indie comics. Ultimately, they're acting in their best interest. So the way I would look at it is maybe rather than having them carry your books, say, can I go to your store for a day and do a signing? Okay, guess what? They can now advertise that they have a local artist doing a signing there that hopefully will bring in some people into their store that day. That works in their best interest.
It helps. It helps to not just show up and say, "Hey, I have an indie comic, sell it for me." It helps to like know the person and negotiate with them. Like, I will do a artist signing at your store, and people can come check it out on like Artist Day or something, right? Like, you have something to offer too, where you're promoting their book with their help. Yeah.
Yeah, so what you end up in those positions is a symbiotic relationship.
Yep.
Whereas it sounds worse than it is, but otherwise it's more a parasitic relationship where it's like they're doing all the work and you're reaping the rewards from their work. So that's just something always to keep in mind. And like I said, it's not just comics; it's a human nature thing, and it's not just all greed. It's it's like a survival thing. I mean, if you think about it, you even have that in the animal world. A mother animal will defend her offspring, but but to a point, they won't necessarily sacrifice themselves. At some point, they say, "My life's more important. You're on your own, kids," and they run. And not to get too philosophical, but if that situation happens in human nature and a parent sacrifices himself to save their kid, that is where love comes in, where you're willing to forego your own best interests.
Right.
So,
Humans have sentimentality, but we kind of have the indie comic scene is a kind of what's weird is there's a dog eat dog aspect to it, but there's also like a community support aspect to it, where a lot of indie creators are supporters of other indie creators' work. So I don't know. I like to think of it as friendly competition rather than cutthroat competition.
yeah, and quite honest, I mean, I don't. The only way I see it as competition is if someone else was trying to make a character that was a ripoff,
Yeah.
Or the only other time I would say I would see other indie creators as competition is if we're running a campaign at the same time and someone says, well, I don't have money to back you because I backed this other guy, then we'd be like, well, shit, but it wouldn't be a situation where I would be like, oh, damn that other guy for running a campaign. Why? Because he's working in his own best interest. It's the same, we're both trying to hustle. So
yeah. All right, yeah, there's wisdom in that. Don't go cutthroat for other indie creators. See it as a space you have to enter into. Like the other trick is don't show up and promote your indie comic under like every single tweet. Like find people who are asking to check out indie comics, or find people who you're chill with and who kind of know who you are before you. Like I've known you guys for a while, right? I've followed Sporkman for a while, so that, just speaking for myself as a YouTuber, it helps to be familiar with you guys and know the history of some of the character, and that makes it easier to open doors when you start doing the crowdfunding. Hey guys, check out my comic, the Gauntlet or Circuit, however you want to describe it.
Yeah, and I would definitely say, as far as what to put in the don't category, is go on, like if someone's working on something, they say, this is what I'm working on. If it's an open forum where it's like a group and everyone's sharing what they're working on, that's one thing. But don't, even if this isn't the intent, don't let yourself come off as trying to pilfer or promote on someone else's site or something where they're promoting their project. I ended up with a situation like that only once or twice. On my, I have a Facebook page for my business. I have a website, but I also have a Facebook page that people follow me. And there's been a couple times where I had a model and I'm like, oh, this is the model I just came out with. And someone else would post like, oh yeah, I've done that one too. Basically the same vehicle or part or whatever. And it would be like, oh look, I did one too. And I'm like thinking to myself, dude, like why what the hell? Knock it off, And I haven't like gotten nasty or taken anyone to task. But I think once or twice I might have removed their post or something like that and just said, or the next post I would put on the page is, hey, just a friendly reminder, please don't promote other people's stuff that
Right.
their stuff would be a competitor. It would be like you're on a page for Coke, and you go on their page and paste and post, hey, I just tried the new Pepsi product that's out. That's pretty good, right? And it's like, come on, not cool. and so I've had that happen once or twice where people did that. I had one guy, he's I said, oh, this is a new product, and he's like, oh, that's not a new product. So and so has had a model of that available for years. And I was like, okay, well, for one, this isn't his page, it's my page. I'm promoting my work, and I never said it was an original design I did. I said it's a new model for me, And that guy, I just mainly told him off. I didn't even delete his post, because he was being a douche. But so that's just something that's not cool. If someone says, "Hey, what's everyone working on?" or it's an open page where everyone can promote themselves, just don't go on someone else's page where they're saying, "Hey, like if someone went on and commented right on a post we put about, hey, we have this campaign for Spearhead, and they're like, hey, I got a campaign for this. So like, no, don't do that. That's bad. Stop it.
Welcome, Underworld Dream, to the chat. We've been looking at Spearhead, which is a spin-off comic from Sporkman, and Sporkman goes to Japan, following the character Nezumi, who was a secondary character in Sporkman Goes to Japan. It is currently funding on Indiegogo. I posted the link in the chat. I forgot to put it in the description, but I'll update the description of this video to have the link to that. And if you Google Spearhead Indiegogo, it should come right up, and you can check out the art. You can read a bit about the story, and most importantly, if you have missed out on the magic of Sporkman, absolutely make sure you get either the print copy catch up or the digital copy catch up, so you can enjoy the magic of Sporkman's previous adventures. Why Spearhead doesn't have a spear as a head? Because it's the spearheads on the spear. Maybe that'll be an ultimate form. She'll transform, and then her head will turn into a giant spear to be a better Sporkman waifu. All right. So, Eric, anything else you would like to add about that you would like people to know as a takeaway about Sporkman Goes to Japan and Spearhead?
I'd like people to know that just one, crowdfunding is kind of how it's all done now. And that's kind of the model. But for me and Chuck, this is something we've been in such a long haul that this isn't new territory for us. This is just, hey, this is a new outlet for funding, and to be able to continue making stories. And we have a bunch of Sporkman stories we want to tell. Both Chuck and I have stuff, stories we want to do that aren't even in the Sporkman universe. But a lot of it has been percolating for, a decade or more. And so this isn't one of those things where, we get funded and then, oh, whatever happened to this book? Why is it taking me 5 years to get this book? And then they said the second one's coming out and that's going to take 3 years. We have a track record of having funded books even when it was out of our own pocket. And so as long as our campaigns get backed, people are going to get their books. And we treat all our customers right. We treat them all equally. We want them to be happy. The way I look at everything is, I'm not even so much a huge comic book reader. I see myself more as a storyteller. And this is just an ideal medium, because you could write a script for a movie and you're like, yeah, I don't have $3 million to make this big explosive action movie. But the printed page, whether you're having two people talking to each other or a big explosion, it's costing you the same amount of money.
Right.
So I always say, if you're someone who always wanted to get into film and filmmaking and wanted to direct or do cinematography, and you have stories, this is your way to do it. You're probably never going to have a movie made of what you want. And besides, a studio's going to get a hold of it, and the first thing they're going to do is say, yeah, we're going to get someone to rewrite your entire story. That's pretty much just how it's done all the time.
Right.
So it, fund a comic. And if anything, that's your pitch. You don't have to pitch a movie script. You look at how many even non-superhero movies are being done now. They're based on graphic novels or comics. And so it's like, if that's ultimately what you want to see is your story on the silver screen, put it in a comic first, because that's where they're getting ideas from.
Yep.
So, and the other thing I would just want to say is, we can complain all we want about, DC and Marvel, and we don't like where things are going. That means we absolutely have to support people like us, the indie creators, because as Underworld Dream didn't hear this, but earlier, I had mentioned there's tons of creators out there that might have the next Batman or Spider-Man waiting in the wings, that might have a huge universe where they want to tell all these stories that we are going to be the biggest fans of. But we might never get to see it unless we help fund them. And that even means not being stingy with our wallet, because there's only one reason you're able to pick up a mainstream comic for $4, and that's because they're printing 10,000 or more of them at a time, and they can get their print runs done for a fraction of what indie creators can.
Yep.
So
economies of scale.
When people look at an indie book and they're like, oh, well, this doesn't even have color and it's less pages, and why does it cost me so much more than a regular comic or whatever? And my response is, for us to keep producing comics, you really should be giving us like $10, not even including shipping, on a black and white comic.
Yeah, there has to be an element of you love the indies to buying indie books. You're not bargain hunting when you buy indie books.
Yeah, and quite honestly, if an indie person can break it big enough, and like I said, kind of break that threshold where they can afford to do, really high printings or break out into, other mediums or merchandise and stuff like that, well, then their prices are going to come down because their costs are coming down. So that's something everyone just kind of needs to always keep in mind when it comes to indie people, is there's a reason we're crowdfunding. It's because we don't have that rich uncle that's just going to cut us a check to make our dreams come true.
Gotta make the dream come true. You gotta do that hustle. You gotta rise and grind, and the people have to speak. You can't hire. You don't have a marketing team doing this for you. It's all you guys. And if you guys want to help make it happen, it's Spearhead on Indiegogo. You can also buy some merchandise from the team at getspork.com. All right, well, hopefully we can get you across that finish line for Spearhead, and I'll be rooting for you guys. Maybe behind the scenes, I'll have to pitch some meme marketing ideas at you guys. But
Yeah, we
obviously,
definitely want to do more with our YouTube channel, Sporkman Studios. For those that are hate YouTube and don't ever want to use it again, we actually do have a duplicate channel on Rumble. We're a little bit behind on reposting some of our stuff there, but we do have both those places. And with Sporkman Studios, we actually want, because I kind of miss film. Honestly, I'm glad I never went to Hollywood and that whole cesspool, but I do miss doing some of the film stuff. And Chuck and I have talked about trying to do more YouTube content as well. And me and Chuck, part of our problem with streaming is he works nights most of the time, and I work days.
yeah.
So for us to get together and really stream as much as we'd like to is difficult. So I'm actually thinking about starting my own sub series on our Sporkman Studio channel, where I might do stuff that's a little bit more short form, like maybe 10 minutes or something like that, just giving my completely random thoughts on different things or reviews, with different stuff in geekdom, and hopefully get some more content on the channel would be nice. Thank
All
you, the
right.
metal.
And it's is it Sporkman Studios is the YouTube channel, or is it a second one?
No, if you just search for Sporkman Studios, you'll find it.
Okay. Search for it on YouTube and it'll pop up. All right. I will update the description with Indiegogo links. The Metal has shared the link on his podcast. So only you can help support indie comics. I want to thank you, Eric, for
And to the metal, if you want to schedule a time to have us on, we will take all the promotion we can get.
bada bing. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Eric. Any you want to any closing words you want to give people?
Not really. Just so much is word of mouth. So doing the sharing. Even if you're just sharing the link to the campaign and the cover image, especially because we think the cover is absolutely gorgeous. We love it. Sharing those links, talking to any friends, any sort of word of mouth or promotion you can do would be great and much appreciated. If you haven't backed it already, please do, because I do think people tend to notice. So the closer you get to being successful, there's a lot of people that will wait till the last minute because they're like, why should I get my credit card charged any earlier than normal? And so that's a normal way to go about it. But what sometimes can happen is people hold off. And so you have other people that are like, well, you know what? It doesn't look like it's going to back because they don't have enough backers right now. And so then they hold off and maybe don't do it. So when something tends to get a lot of momentum, just having that early momentum helps because more people talk about the fact it has momentum. They're like, hey, any crowdfunders doing really good? Oh, well, there's this one Spearhead, man, they're tearing it up. And then that person's like, okay, well, I want to go check it out.
Yeah,
So,
that can getting a little bump and can help you with like Indiegogo's whatever it is, their algorithm or something. They like it when they start seeing something getting a little traction, so they might give it an
yeah,
additional bump from there.
and
So
I think
start the
that's
snowball rolling, someone. Yeah,
and I think that's there is a certain strategy behind it, and it may be why some people do it. Is setting a low goal, because what happens is as soon as they meet that goal, it's, hey, they're fully funded, and who knows that they may actually. I don't think Indiegogo does it as much as Kickstarter does, but then it's going to kind of shift a little, where people are like, well, I feel comfortable giving them their money because I don't even have to worry about whether they fund or not. They've already funded. Now, that creator could be taking a huge hit in their wallet. I don't know. But, that's a potential strategy people do.
and the
Yeah,
Metal accepts your
I will be
offer to
doing
come
that
on
as
his
well.
podcast. Yeah, I'm
Uh,
at a Metal.
But the other thing I would just say is, I really appreciate you getting us on, because I think doing the streams and stuff like that, it reaches out to different fandoms. Like we have our followers, and maybe all of our followers have heard this pitch already. But now you're going to have followers that don't necessarily follow us. Now they've all heard it. So
Yes, alternate internet audiences. That's what I was trying to
yeah.
think of earlier. Yeah. Definitely some Deltarune and Robotnik and Sonic the Hedgehog meme fanboys. That's the target audience on the #1 Marmaduke channel these days.
Yeah, you never know where your cross promotion lies.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Eric.
Yeah, like I said, I absolutely appreciate having me on, and all the help you've been.
All
It's
right, I
been
will
really fun.
and I'll post out updates in my community tab because a lot of people get community tab posts who don't get the video notifications. Oh yeah, you gotta like, comment, and subscribe to my channel so that YouTube will promote this live stream more and promote the channel more. All right, thank you everybody. Thank you the Metal and Neostar Productions and Sporkman Studios for joining in the chat. And this has been fun. More indie comics coming in the future, I hope. So look, I'll just reiterate. I love Sporkman Goes to Japan. It's a hoot. I crack up. Every couple pages I'm cracking up reading it. So I know the tone will be different for Spearhead, but I am excited to see what you do with this character in the future.
Oh, it's going to be ratcheting up some of the action, especially in Zero. Zero, almost all the pages on this are fighting and chase scenes.
Speaks to me as a guy who likes action movies. Definitely. Do I get explosions?
There's explosions.
Yes, explosions. All right, I'm looking forward to it.
And killer robots and everything.
All right, Sporkman says, have a great night, all. And Neostar says, it's been a blast. Thank you all for joining. More comics coming down the road. With that, I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. My guest is Eric Berry, and the project is Spearhead. Love you guys, and we'll catch you later.